There's a moment that happens in doorways. You've done it thousands of times and never once caught yourself doing it. You're about to walk into a room, a meeting, a dinner, someone's birthday, and in the half second before you cross the threshold, something in you gets recruited. Your face does a small amount of work. Your voice, when you use it, will come out at a slightly different pitch than the one you were using in the car. Nobody taught you this. There was no lesson. And if I asked you to describe what you just changed, you couldn't tell me, because the adjustment happens below the level where words live. Now, the person who walks through that door, the adjusted one. Most people would say that's not really them. That's the work version, the party version, the version for the in-laws. The real one stayed in the car. I want to spend the next 9 minutes taking that comforting idea apart. Because when sociologists actually went looking for the real one, the you that exists before all the adjustments, what they found was not what anyone wanted to find. In 1959, a Canadian sociologist named Erving Goffman published a book that people in his field still argue about: The Presentation of Self in Everyday Life. His method was almost insultingly simple. He watched people in hotels and hospitals on a remote Scottish island where he lived among crofting farmers for a year, taking notes on how they behaved when guests were in the house versus when the door closed. His conclusion: social life is theater. Not metaphorically, structurally. Every interaction has a front stage where you perform, and a backstage where you drop it. The waiter who glides through the dining room is a different organism the second he pushes through the kitchen door. You've seen this. You've been this, the customer service voice that dies in your throat the instant you hang up. Fine, you might say. But the backstage self, the one after the door closes, that one's real. Goffman's answer is the uncomfortable part. The backstage is also a stage. Your relaxed self, your unguarded self, the self you show your oldest friend at 2 a.m, that's a performance too. Slower, warmer, more honest in its content, but shaped always for an audience. Even alone, you narrate yourself to yourself. There's a spectator in your head, and it never leaves the theater. He wasn't calling you a fraud. His point was stranger than that. There may be no offstage. The performance may go all the way down. Sit with how weird that is. Because if he's right, the question, who am I really, is built wrong. It assumes a floor under the costumes. Goffman spent his career suggesting the floor is costumes. People don't wear the mask the same way. There are 3 kinds of wearers, and by the end of this section you'll know which one you are. The first kind knows exactly what they're doing. Watch them enter a party. 3 seconds in the doorway, that's all they need to map the entire room. Who's anxious? Who has the power? What this specific crowd will reward. And then they become it, mid-stride, the way you'd switch languages. We have a flattering name for this: social intelligence. Here's the question nobody asks. Where does a skill like that come from? Almost always from a house where it wasn't optional. A child who grows up with a parent whose mood decides everything, the slammed cabinet, the silence at dinner that meant something, learns to read a room before learning to read. Not as a talent, as a radar. 20 years later, everyone calls it charm. The nervous system that built it still calls it what it was: surveillance. The second kind stopped being able to feel the mask at all. You know this person, maybe you love this person, the reliable one, the funny one, the one who's fine, always fine. Now ask them to drop the act, and they'll look at you with genuine confusion, because there is no act as far as they can tell. There's only one way to find out the truth, and life eventually runs the experiment. Reality contradicts the character. The competent one fails in public. The strong one ends up needing help, and the reaction is never proportional. Rage, collapse, weeks of shame over what should have been a bad afternoon, because you didn't bruise their ego. You put your hand through what they thought was a wall, and for 1 second they felt the draft from the other side. But it's the third kind of person this channel is named for. This is the one who gets curious. Maybe after a breakup. Maybe at 3 a.m. For no reason they could defend. And they do the thing you're never supposed to do. They go looking. Peel off the work self. Fine, that one was obvious. The family self, the friend self. Layer after layer, expecting any moment now to hit bedrock. The genuine article, the one all these costumes were protecting, and the peeling just continues. Every layer turns out to be another audience-facing surface. Costumes all the way down. And underneath the last one, not a face. A vacancy that learned to smile. I call it the empty mask. And before you file it under other people's problems, stay with me, because in the next few minutes I'm going to show you exactly how one gets built. Nobody chooses it. It's installed. Usually before you could talk. Donald Winnicott was a pediatrician before he was a psychoanalyst, which matters. He'd examined something like 60,000 infants and their mothers by the end of his career. He knew what he was looking at. What he noticed was this. A baby arrives with spontaneous impulses. It reaches, cries, delights, rages, all of it uncalculated. In a good enough home, those impulses get received. Not perfectly received. The baby gestures, the world answers, and the child slowly builds the conviction that its inner life is allowed to exist outside its body. But some children make a different discovery. Their spontaneous self turns out to be inconvenient. Too loud for a fragile parent, too needy for an exhausted one. Too much in a house that only had room for a child who was easy. And a child in that position runs the only play available. It builds a decoy. A compliant, pleasing, manageable self to send out into the family while the real one goes into storage. Winnicott called this the false self, and here's what he insisted on. It's not a lie the child tells. It's a bodyguard. It works. It keeps the caregiver calm and the child safe, and it does its job so well, for so long, that by adulthood the storage room has been walled over. The decoy signs the lease, takes the job, gets married. Not because the person is fake, because the decoy is the only self that ever got any practice. The cruelest detail is what this looks like from outside. It looks excellent. False self-adults are frequently the most impressive people in the room. Accomplished, attuned, unfailingly appropriate, because appropriateness was the survival skill. Winnicott wrote about patients who had every external marker of a successful life and reported, in his office, that none of it felt like it was happening to them. High functioning. Hollow. The performance reviews are outstanding, and the theater is empty. So, a question, and I'd ask you not to dodge it with the first answer that arrives. When you're alone, properly alone, phone in the other room, no task, no audience even in your imagination, what's left? Some of you have an answer. There's a self that shows up in the silence, with appetites and reactions and a mood of its own, and it doesn't need anyone watching to feel like it's happening. If that's you, your masks are tools. You put them down and there's a hand underneath. But some of you just felt something tilt. Because the honest answer is that solitude feels less like privacy and more like intermission. A gray waiting between performances where you kill time until someone needs you to be someone again. Maybe you've noticed you don't know what you want unless someone else wants something first. Maybe your opinions arrive pre-checked against an invisible committee. Maybe rest itself feels vaguely illegitimate, like a stage with the lights off. If that landed somewhere, notice it. Don't rush past it. That tilt is the most honest thing that's happened to you all day. It's the sound of a question reaching a room that's usually soundproofed. And notice, too, that Winnicott didn't think the real self dies. He thought it hides. Waiting, his word, for conditions safe enough to come back out. Which means the vacancy behind the mask isn't a fact about you. It's a location. Things that are in storage can be retrieved. One more thing and I'll let you go. Goffman was right that we all perform, and Winnicott was right that some of us are performing instead of existing. And the entire difference between a personality and a prison is whether you can feel the seam. Whether somewhere in you there's still a border between the character and whatever hired it. Most psychology channels stop at the flattering version of this. You're all authentic. The mask is just a phase. 5 tips to be yourself. I don't think you clicked on a video called The Empty Mask because you wanted to be flattered. Next time, the character you perform for the person closest to you. Because you have one, a specific, well-rehearsed one. And the disturbing part isn't that it exists. It's what it was built to prevent that person from ever seeing. If you want to be here for that, you know what to do.